Hi, good afternoon, everyone. All right, welcome to the NSA Nugget series by National Civil Academy, and also a very warm welcome to everyone from the virtual booth and also on the roadshow itself. Although it's a rainy day, all right, we are here cozy learning something for this computer maintenance basic troubleshooting techniques by Institute of Technical Education. All right, so by the way, let me introduce myself. Right, I'm Karman. All right, so most of them call me Thong or they call me Karman. Right, so I've been a trainer for so-called NSA and also Civil Academy, and also for the continuous education by ITE for many years, especially for this computer repair and maintenance course, which I will actually brief you all more about what's the content of the course and also how long it takes. All right, so the gist of this takeaway today is to show you something useful, all right? Especially nowadays, what happened is that we are all going on e-learning and we are going to the virtual world. So in the nutshell, the backbone of all equipments that you've got to see nowadays, especially when we are going home-based learning, e-learning, or even the industrial 4.0 that you are going to look at, most of them, or in fact all, the backbone of this system is a typical computer, right? So if you are able to manage and maintain and repair your computers, all right, it will be a long run knowledge build up that you can enhance in, right? So we're going to start with a basis first, all right? So what happens is that I will introduce you all the different components that is going to make up of the computer, right? Be it for a laptop or be it for a laptop or a desktop, all right? So pardon me, all right? So it's typically the same, just that physically they look different, right? And in terms of configuration, in terms of power sense, or in terms of portability, you do need to weigh between the pros and cons between them. But the structure of them working for a certain outcome is actually the same, right? In terms of personal computer, we call the desktop, or for the laptop, which is for the portability, right? So the basis for learning the different parts is actually the same. Let me move on and show you more, right? So that you all can actually understand further, right? Okay. Okay, so typically through this maybe half an hour to 45 minutes, what we're gonna, the takeaway or what are the things that you've got to learn is actually the basic knowledge about a personal computer, right? So a personal computer can be a desktop or even a laptop itself, right? And okay, so the thing is that you typically need to also understand the architecture of a computer system and also understanding the functions of the peripherals device in a microcomputer. So microcomputer can be as simple as a handphone do have microcomputer inside, right? Just that is portable handphone, right? And computers, laptop, all right? Okay, so before we go further, all right, deeper into what you are going to learn today, all right, let's do have a poll before I give you all the nutshell or the answers to this short seminar, right, or course. Okay, so my question to you is that in your daily experience or through your various encounter, right, which peripherals, all right, peripherals in terms of what are the components or what are the things in the computer system or even for the laptop system, all right, are most vulnerable to failure or being faulty, all right? Being faulty means they spoil, all right? After a year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, all right, they will spoil the first, all right, or most common, right? So first one, we are talking about random access memory, all right? Or in short, we call it the RAM, right? Okay, then motherboard, all right, then central processing unit and power supply unit, all right? So submit your answers through the Facebook now, all right? Okay, while I go through the slides with you. Okay, so before we start, all right, into troubleshooting or even looking into the problem and techniques that we want to do while doing repairs and maintenance, you ought to need to know how to differentiate the two problems altogether, all right? So to start with, you need to bucketize the hardware failures, right? The hardware typical failure and also the software typical failure, right? So on the screen itself, you can see there's two buckets. One is on the hardware and one is on software. So hardware refers to the computer physical components, all right, and the software refers to the set of instructions, all right. So I can see that a majority of you answers motherboard, right? So actually, it's not the motherboard, all right. In fact, the most lasting component in a computer system or even a laptop, all right, the most lasting component in your computer system is actually the power supply. All right, your power supply. And the second to be common failure will be your hard disk drive, right? The hard disk mechanical drive, all right? So I'm gonna explain to you why, okay, later on, why a hard disk drive will fail and also a power system will fail, all right, in a way. Okay, let's go through the components first before we go deeper into why is that so. All right, so let's go through the hardware first, all right? So the hardware itself, from left to right from the screen itself, you can see that there's actually the input. There's input devices. The input devices can be any kind of input commands that you give to the computer system, all right? Similarly, just like your phone, all right? Even voice recognition is a type of input command or an input device, all right? So on a computer system, typically you can talk about a stylus, all right, as an input device where you draw on the tablet itself and you tap on it and you use the on-screen keyboard. Those are input devices, right? For example, keyboards where you type, all right, you type the command using the mouse to scroll and show where and what you want to do. Those are called input devices, right? Okay, so all right, so yes, okay, I hear you. Your answers are motherboard, all right? So it's not the motherboard, right? So as I explained earlier on, maybe I explained a little bit more about why isn't it motherboard. Right, the motherboard itself is only 40 or A will be in a situation of having faults is during your installation for desktop. Right, if you choose to purchase a typical component set, all right, to assemble it yourself, all right, at the main stage where you start off doing assembly, for example, things like this is a motherboard itself. So if you do the correct procedure, right? It's a one-off installation whereby once you place the motherboard into the casing, all right, or into a capsule, right, into a laptop capsule and things like that. If you do it properly, you do the grounding of yourself handling the motherboard. The residing problem to happen on the motherboard is very minimum because you are not gonna touch it, or you're not gonna have any mechanical movement. And what do they have is in fact holders, all right, like this, right? And you can see from the backplane of the typical motherboard is actually those wires line, all right, embedded. Okay, so while you are handling the motherboard, make sure you don't bend the motherboard, right? While you are installing the chipset onto the motherboard, typically we will actually place a piece of cloth or sponge with a ESD mat on top or it's sitting in between them, right? So that you do not have electrostatic discharge spoiling or contaminating the motherboard itself, right? So the motherboard is the least chance of failure, right? The typical failure comes from a power supply, right? Like this, okay? So a power supply like this. So a typical failure, if you happen to have a desktop that is sitting there and it's not working, all right, and is you can't power it on and things like that, the chances for that to fail is probably the power supply, all right? You just need to change the power supply. The power supply can easily cost you just $50 to $80 range, all right? Power supply. And I'm gonna show you later on how to test it in an easier way to check whether the power supply is working fine, all right? Of course, there's another way that is using the multimeter, but that's too much of checking all the cables all together, right? Okay. Okay, so the thing is that before we move on, right, what you got to see over here, right, compared to what I mentioned early on is the input devices, all right. So over here, you are talking about the device communication through a wireless connection or through the cable attached to the case at the connection. So these are so-called to your output, all right. These are considered the output devices that is gonna be connected to your backplane or be the side plane of your laptop, right? So your laptop itself do have USB port, do have power supply coming in. So power supply adapter coming in, and also your sound, right? For example, hooking on to a sound speaker and things like that. So these are the backplane connectors, all right? So you get to see the keyboard ports, right? Serial ports, USB ports. It depends on what is the configuration of your system. Some of you might have 2 USB ports, right? Some of you might have only 1, right? If let's say you are using a tablet, right, typically. So how to differentiate between a USB 3 or a USB 2, typically you can get to see over here. This is actually the USB port, right? So the USB port itself over here, right, is the tongue, right, itself is black in color, right? So this is typically a USB 2 version, right? And if you're gonna see a blue in color, which is a tongue is in blue in color, right, that's a USB 3, right? So what's the difference? The difference is in terms of the transfer rate or the transfer speed, right? So what happened is that for the right, okay, so for the slide itself, right, so for the typical USB, right, what we can see is that the USB itself is actually okay, hold on. Okay, we are on input device, keyboard, enhanced keyboard, and okay, right, okay, never mind. So are you all getting to see my slide change? Right, okay, let me see. Right, so we are on slide 7, right? Okay, we are on slide 7. Okay, so you are seeing my slides change. If you can't see, you can type on the Facebook so-called chat, right? If you are not getting to see my slide change, because now we are on a virtual world. Right, so okay, so let's come back to this. Where were we? All right, we were talking about the transfer speed of the USB. So if you are getting to see a blue in color or a black in color, in a simple term, is the transfer rate. All right, so if you are able to transfer 500 pictures in 1 second, right? For example, that will be, for example, the USB 2. All right, if you are talking about USB 3, it will be 3 times faster. For example, 1,500 pictures in 1 second. Right, so the USB 3 transfer of picture from your computer itself to your external device, be it a hard disk drive or be it to another computer, it will be much faster. Same thing for receiving, right? So the receiving rate will be much faster. So why we have this is because we want the speed of transfer being faster. But for USB 3, USB 2, all right, USB 2 or USB 3, if your system is USB 3 or your device is a USB 3 and your ports that is reading on your computer or your PC is a USB 2, it will be downward compatible. That means it will only be used as a USB 2 because the capability is only a USB 2 to start off with on your system itself, right? Okay, so other than that, the input devices, as we have mentioned earlier on, is about the keyboard and the mouse. Those are the input devices, right? Then the output devices is as simple as anything that you can hear, all right? A monitor, right? A printer which produce output on a paper, right? Hopefully in no time, all right, we can even smell, all right, maybe D24 smell sending through email, right? So the smell that is coming is also a output, all right, output where you can smell, all right, and hear, right? For example, hearing, you can hear music. So devices that allow you to have the sound coming out are called output devices, okay, all right. And for digital monitors, you are looking at a different cable. So the standard one is actually the one that is the VGA, right? The VGA, and then the very common nowadays that we use for high definition are HDMI, right, or DVI. So very rare situation that we will come by to get to see a parallel port connectors. Those are previously for printers. Those somehow they are obsoleted, but not to be surprised, they still exist. All right, they still exist. They are still in the market. All right. So the thing is that the production is no longer there, but the system is there. So if you're gonna get spare parts and things like that, they will cost much higher. All right, because it's difficult to get. It's more of a demand and supply thing. All right. Okay. Okay, so hardware inside the case. So typically inside the casing, all right, or even in a laptop, all right, you will get to see a motherboard with a CPU, all right. And how it looks like is that typically over here, all right, you can get to see over this square little block over here. This is in fact the CPU, all right. So what does a CPU does? All right, the CPU is just like a brain, right? It's just like a human brain which do the calculation, do the instruction, and it will pass the instructions to the different parts of the body. So the body is actually the motherboard. So the body consists of maybe the sound card, the video card, right? The linkages to the hard disk, doing storage, and also to any other parts that is controlled by the CPU. So the CPU is the brain, the motherboard is the veins, and also the different parts of the body, right? To take instruction from the CPU itself, right? So let me take it out and show you how does it looks like, right? So in the course itself that you're gonna learn from the 30 hours course that is provided by ITE every Saturday. It's a 5-session course. The course itself will actually show you how to dismantle and assemble a PC, and typically it will also show you how to do troubleshooting, how to actually get yourself the chance of getting virus being lowered, or even show you how to eliminate virus, or installing antivirus software, or even go without an antivirus software, right? So we will share with you that during the course, all right, which is a 30-hour session and 5 consecutive Saturdays, all right, for that course. Okay, so typically this is how a CPU look like, right? It's squarish, right? But of course, it's not 4 corners where you can mount it, all right? You can typically see there's 2 notches that is guiding. It's called the guiding notch, where there's only 1 position that it can sit onto the socket, right? So this is called the socket over here, right? This is where the pins are to receive the CPU itself, okay? Right? Okay, so the next will be the hard disk drive, all right? So the hard disk drive is typically, why is it called hard? Because basically what you have inside a hard disk drive, right? A hard disk drive is typically hard. First thing, right? If you're gonna open the top cover over here, what you will get to see are actually the mechanical components, the media, just like a CD, shiny surface, all right? You will get to see during the course, all right, when you come by, if you join the course that is being conducted by ITE, right? And what you have inside is actually the head stack assembly, and they are really physically mechanical system running in a hard disk drive. So do not drop a hard disk, all right? A hard disk drive, once you drop it, all right, the components inside the hard disk drive will be dismembered, all right? So they will crash, all right? Eventually your hard disk will crash. Why do we call crash? That means your hard disk will start to have high screeching sound, and end of the day, whatever data that you have inside will be, you will not be able to retrieve, all right? If you need to retrieve, you will need to use hardware way to actually take out the disk and things like that to recover the data. So the hard disk is not that expensive nowadays, all right? The hard disk typically for the 1 terabyte one costs you roughly about $70 to $75 for 1 terabyte, all right? But the data recovery part is the expensive part, all right? Whereby it can easily go up to, like, for example, $4 per gigabyte of data recovery. It can be to that extent. So imagine if you have all your travel photos that is being stored in 1 hard disk, all right, and you have 1 terabyte of them. So the recovery will be very costly, all right? So it's more expensive to recover the data of the drive than to buy a drive. That's what I want to share with you. So the gist of the story of storing your data, do not store all your data in 1 hard disk drive, all right? Because once it's crashed, all your data will be gone. All right, so on top of that, we have the SSD, which is a solid state drive. All right, so solid state drive are more expensive than a typical hard drive. Right, it's about 3 times more expensive. So imagine a 1 terabyte SSD could cost you maybe $300 to $400, whereby a typical hard disk drive like this can cost you only like maybe $70 to $80. So you can see the price difference. But of course, there's a niche way of using them. The SSD, the response time is much faster, the boot up time is much faster because there's no so-called checks being done, all right, on a typical SSD drive compared to a physical hard disk drive. You can see the brain of the hard disk drive, all right. So if you power this on, all right, in fact, the hard disk drive itself will do its self-check. That means it is by itself a system, all right, by itself, okay? Right, so on top of that, we'll be talking about the power supply, all right, the adapter cards, okay, and the cables. So how it typically look like is something like this, all right. So you can see on the screen itself, the PSU is the power supply unit, the CPU, and the cooling fan, all right. So why is the cooling fan there? All right, so the cooling fan is there for a purpose, all right. It can spin both direction, all right. So it's either spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise, depending on the temperature of your CPU, all right. The CPU, since we know that the CPU itself is a brain, so it works like just like us. So if we catch a fever, all right, we want to cool ourselves down, all right. If we are too cold, we can't think, right? If we are too warm, we can't think also. So same goes for a CPU, right? The CPU typical temperature, working temperature could be somewhere around 55. So he can't be too cold, right? If he's too cold, what happens is that the heatsink will turn anti-clockwise so that it will draw in heat and warm up the CPU itself. If it is too hot, all right, what happens is that the fan will turn clockwise and suck out the heat from the CPU and cool him down. So that's what the so-called heat sink fan is for. All right, so that's the main purpose. And what you got to see over here, you get to see the RAM. All right, so the RAM is the random access memory. So we call him the very forgetful one. Right. So what happened is that whatever you have stored randomly that is being pulled by the hard disk, all right. So the CPU will actually ask from the hard disk, bring me this information. So once the CPU have done that, it will pass it to the RAM, for example, or a CPU giving a certain instruction, it will be stored temporarily in the RAM. So what does the RAM do is that to store temporary data or instructions that is being given by the CPU so that you can get it fast. Because by the CPU having to retrieve from the hard disk itself, it might take a longer time. So for a RAM itself, which typically 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, so the more you have, the more multitask you can do, right? So that's how a RAM works. And once you power down, all the information in the RAM will be removed, all right? So therefore, it's called a random access memory. And just remember, this RAM is a very forgetful RAM, and a hard disk or a SSD is a very long-term memory device, all right? It can store very long-term memory into that, okay? Right. Okay, so the next thing that we talk about motherboard, all right, so we talk about the chipset. So we have two kinds of chipset as for now, right? Currently, we have the Intel chipset, or we have the so-called the AMD chipset, right? So how does it look like? So on the top left-hand corner that you can see the pins coming out, right? Those pins coming out are those that are so-called, we call it the male, all right, the male pins, all right. Then the other one is actually the Intel, right? So what you can see over here, right, without pins that I have, this is in fact the Intel chip, right? So the receiving end for an Intel chip will be a male socket, right, with all the pins protruding, right? Vice versa, for the one that you've got to see on the top left-hand corner, those are the male pins which belong to the AMD. So the socket itself will be holes, right, which is residing. So it depends on your usage. Gamers like to buy AMD CPU, right? So Intel is more traditional, right, where it's more stable. But of course, AMD do have its goodness also. So there's no particular chipset that is so-called best in all ways. So they have pros and cons in various different areas, right? Okay, so primary storage, all right, as we have spoken about the RAM, right, random access memory, so memory plugs and things like that, all right. So typically a RAM will sit in a socket like this, all right. So some of your motherboard would have 2 slots, some of you only have 1, right? Some might even have 4, right? So when you want to change the RAM, right? For example, if you would like to increase, sometimes you have lagging, right? Your PC lag, your laptop lag in a way when you try to open too many windows. So that's when your RAM is not that sufficient because you are not able to multitask. The multitask outcome is actually governed by also the RAM. So if you are doing a lot of drawings, you are opening a lot of multi-windows on your terminal itself, you probably need a higher RAM, right, on board. Right? So if you want, you can buy 8 gig or 16 gig, right, to start off with. Okay, right? So typically it's 8 gig bare minimum as for current software nowadays. Okay, right. Okay, so secondary storage, all right, holds data permanently, all right, so compared to the RAM itself. So we have the flash drive, we have the memory card. So the memory cards are just typically storage cards in just like for your phone, right? You add on storage card, a micro SD, SD card onto your phone for storage. So do remember, never store your data, right, or backup files in your main hard disk, all right? If you talk about backup, when we talk about backup, it's talking about saving the data onto another storage device. If you're gonna back up in the same hard disk, all right, I ever heard of participants saying that I have partitions, drive C, D, E, F on my hard disk drive itself, and I store my data on E and my videos on F, all right, things like that. Those are not called backing up, all right? Those are called partitioning of your data. It's just like putting folders, all right? So what happens if your hard disk crash? That means it goes faulty. All your data inside, regardless whether whichever partition you have, all right, on the hard disk drive, it goes together. That means it crashes together and it goes faulty altogether. But if you're gonna store it, be it on a CD-ROM, CD, all right, you can burn it, or you store it on another device, which is also a storage device, be it a SSD, be it a micro SD card. Those are called backup, right? When you store another copy on another place or another storage device, is called a backup. So if you are talking about recovery, if you have never start backing up, then we are not able to do any recovery, all right? So backup can also be backing up in the cloud, okay, for example, but cloud do have limited space, right? Sometimes you do need to pay for extra storage space also, okay? All right. Okay, main storage is mostly the hard disk, all right? So nowadays, the main storage, some gamers like to choose it to be the SSD, right? The storage, the so-called solid state device, all right? Solid state drive, because the response time is much faster, right? So for us, it's not that significant unless you want your operating system at the snap of the finger, it start up, all right? So in most cases nowadays, your tablets are also on solid state, all right? Okay, not on physical hard drive anymore. Okay, all right, and these are the different connectors, and the optical drive you can see over here is typical optical drive, right? So what I'm gonna do now is that I'm gonna share with you one little trick that I have, right? So you can see over here, there's a device which is a power supply, right? So this power supply is not working, for example, right? So if I'm gonna take away the connecting pins over here, right? I'm gonna take away the connecting pins. If I'm gonna turn it power on, you can see that, right? It's not turning at all, right? So what I'm gonna do now is that I'm gonna do the jumping, right? Okay, I'm gonna do the jumping, right? As what you can see over here. Okay, the green to the black, right? The green to the black. Okay, by doing so, you will be able to see whether the fan is turning, right? Okay, and at the same time, you can actually connect up to a peripheral, right? For example, a CD-ROM like this, right? Okay, a CD-ROM like this to make sure that it's working. You can see the light is blinking, right? So if you have a power supply failure, all right, and you want to differentiate between whether is it a motherboard failure or be it a power supply failure, as what we have mentioned earlier on, the typical failure is normally your power supply, right? So if you would like to do the check, you can actually do what is being shown on the slide itself. Do the jumping. There's only one green wire, right? There's only one green wire. You can simply just use any paper clip, right? And just make a bend. This is just a typical paper clip. Just make a bend, and from the green pocket over here, right? The green socket, right? The green socket that you can see on the slides itself. Just jump it to any black socket, right? Any black. That means there's one PS on green to any one of the black. All right, then you can actually trigger it on. If it doesn't turn on, it's confirmed that your power supply is down, right? So by connecting them to a device, especially like a CD-ROM, it's very clear cut, right? Okay, Q&A time, right? So, so if you would like to learn more about, it's a very big topic, right? Of course, but we need to start somewhere. It's not difficult, all right? I have a senior participant who I think recently came out on paper, right? He was being featured in the Straits Times, right? He's Mr. Bob, all right? He was like about 89 years old during then, 3 years ago, right? He came to the course and he became a consultant, right? He's a consultant to help elderly in terms of computer repair and stuff like that. All right, so he do help and he do go around consulting and also doing repairs. All right, so it's lifelong learning. There's no age to coming to the course. All right, so most importantly, you enjoy the process. All right, okay, so I can see that I have a few questions. So someone you say that you just bought a Lenovo where let me see, hold on. Right, let me try to answer the question. All right, good to have questions. All right, keep on coming. Okay, I just bought a Lenovo. Where is the power supply as I don't have a CPU? Okay, is that a desktop or a laptop? Right, so if it's a desktop itself, is most of the time because of the air ventilation is normally on the top of your casing, right? Where you get to see the power supply is supposed to be where your socket goes in, right? You get to have a power going into the port. So that portion, the top portion, or most of them will reside on the top portion because of hot air risers, cold air sink, right? So because of the power supply is mainly the heat contributor also, right? So it will actually be connected in this way. So that portion where you get to see the cable going in, the one that is being connected, that's the power supply, all right? Okay, I have another question. What is the average lifespan of laptop these days? Okay, good question. Right, the average lifespan. Okay, as for current days, as what I got to know, the short warranty is about one year or two. All right, things like that. So if you're gonna talk about the lifespan, it depends on how you're gonna use it. For a tablet wise, all right, the battery is the one that need to be replaced, all right, tablet, and it's sealed, right? There's no screws to it. You need to tear it open, right? Remove the heat sink, heat glue, and then you need to open, right? So the chances of the screen breaking is very high, right? So when you send for repair, all right, or when you do for repair, do bear in mind the screen will break, or most likely will break, and the amount that you're gonna pay for includes the battery and also the insurance for the screen to crack. All right. So if you ask about how long is the lifespan, typically they can last you about 3 years. All right, for a typical laptop. All right. So desktop wise could be slightly longer because desktop wise you can upgrade. Right, you can upgrade for a laptop. If for your personal usage or due to your use, all right, it can last you maybe 2 to 3 years. But when you purchase a laptop, bear in mind that you will not be able to upgrade further. Only upgradable content in physical components in your laptop is your hard disk drive and also your RAM. Other than that, your CPU, unlikely that you can find a higher version if your motherboard is being fixed. Okay, question 3, how to know if it is USB 2 or USB 3? Okay, good question. Right, as I mentioned early on, so you can look at the color over here. Okay, this is a USB. You can see there's a USB device. Right, I have 4 USB port over here. And you can see the tongue, the inner connector is black in color. So this is typically USB 2. If you get to see the tongue, all right, looking at it is blue in color. That means it's like this color, this kind of blue, right? Inside, all right, the connector is a USB 3. All right, okay. Question 4, my laptop screen cracked. Please advise me how to change it by yourself. Okay, so the question is, all right, come for my course, all right? Okay, I'll show you how. Okay, in this short time frame, it's difficult for me to show you how, but I can suggest to you, right? First, you need to see, is your laptop a tablet, right? If your laptop is a tablet, the tablet front cover and the screen is being laminated. That means it's by glue. So you need to use a heat gun to actually heat the side up so that to melt the glue so that you can peel it open. But if you are using a traditional laptop, right, there will be screws that you can remove. And what you need to do is that you will just simply find the same screen, or you can go to any, for example, Carousel and things like that, see whoever want to dispose as parts only, and you might want to grab the part to replace for your laptop. But I can see that from the question that you asked, probably you are using a tablet, all right, because your screen cracked. Okay, so the only way to remove and change it is to find the same screen, all right. Then you need to use a heat gun to remove, to heat up the corners, all right, so that your glue, your laminating glue will melt. Once it melts, then you can start to slowly peel open. So the peeling process is critical because you might further crack, right, the components inside, all right, of your laptop. So it is a very niche process, right? So how to differentiate the USB port? So I have mentioned the USB port is by color inside the inner tongue, right? So whether is it blue in color or black in color. So USB 2 and USB 3. Even for USB 1 is not blue in color. As long as it's blue in color, it's USB 3. Right, so would the CPU be hot to touch after using for a certain number of hours? All right, the CPU will be hot, all right? Therefore, the heatsink is there, right, to cool it down. So you can see there's a heat gel over here, and the heatsink itself is meant to cool him down. So it will turn clockwise and endothermic, right? So you can see this is a typical fan heatsink that you can see those mini fridge that they are using, okay? All right, does laptop has an inbuilt fan? Okay, yes. Okay, the laptop, traditional laptop have, if let's say you are using a tablet, right? If you there's no fan, all right, it's a natural cooling system, all right. So most laptop would have fan built in, but very small one, right? So you need to sometimes be careful of your fan if you are those who like to place your laptop on the carpet. All right, so literally it becomes a vacuum cleaner because your cold air will come from the left, and your hot air will be dissipated from the right. So what happens is that if your computer will try to suck in those colder air. So at the same time, while it's trying to suck in the colder air, you will also suck in the dust. All right, so if you like to do your work on the carpet or on your bed, so do bear in mind, make sure that it's clean. If not, all the hair will get stuck inside the CPU, all right, or the CPU fan itself. All right, so the next one, does SSD lifespan last longer than normal hard disk drive? Okay, for SSD lifespan, right, it's supposed to be longer, right? But it also have a limitation of the number of million write-read. All right, there's a 1 million write-read lifespan. So, but of course it can go beyond because due to the SSD is not hardware driven. That means it's inside the hard disk drive, right, or the SSD, there's no components inside. So even if you drop it, all right, for a portable laptop, it will not be that easily deficient or spoiled, all right, in this case. But for a typical hard disk drive, or even a 3.5, this is a 3.5 inch. You have the 2.5 inch one, which is smaller, so about half the size. So it residing in a laptop. So advice is that while you are using a laptop, knowing that your laptop carries a hard disk drive, not an SSD, power it down when you are traveling. That means when you are carrying it around, putting it in your backpack, all right, do power down. If you let it hibernate, what will happen is that the disk inside will still carry on to spin, and there's a head or reader which is flying on top of this, right? And it will still hover around, and what happens is that it will actually damage the disk itself, and there will be a head slap, all right, so-called a ding onto the surface of the media. But for SSD itself, there's no media, right? There's no medium inside a hard disk drive. Therefore, typically it will last longer, all right? Okay, it will last longer. So the next question, all right. So question 9, blue is a USB 3 and faster. Yes, okay, the USB 3 is faster, right? It's downward compatible. USB 3 is supposed to be faster, USB 2 is slower, right? Depending on your hardware, right? So, and your receiving component, all right? So both of them need to be USB 3, so that they can perform as USB 3. Else they will be, if your receiving, your system is a USB 3, but your device is a USB 2, it will be downward compatible. That means it will run at the USB 2 performance, okay? Right, the CPU is so small item, we always call the whole unit a CPU. We are wrong. If wrong, what should we call it? Okay, the whole system is called a computer system. Right, the CPU is just the central processing unit, right? The central processing unit, which is called the brain. All right. So if you're gonna call the whole, including the motherboard plus the hard disk drive, right? A complete system is called a computer system. All right, it's called a computing system or called a computer system. All right. Okay, how to resolve possible Seagate hard disk not detected by Windows 10. Right. So there's various reasons why your hard disk is not detected. Right. So either you have to hear whether you can hear any sound. All right. When you spin it up, connect to a power supplies to hear it, whether is it spinning. All right. There will be cases where there's stiction, where the head actually gets stuck onto the media and it stops spinning. So, or even the media itself is stopped spinning. Therefore, that causes your hard disk fail in totality, right? So there will not be a software that can recover. You need to use hardware removal of the disk and merging it into a reader to save it, right? So any implication to encrypt portable hard disk drive when requested? Any effect on hard disk drive when used? Okay, so encrypting, all right. So of course, yes, you need to encrypt, but do be careful when you encrypt be it your SD card or be it your hard disk drive. When you try to encrypt your data, right, you must also take note that you need to decrypt it when you want to use it or when you want to dismount your SD card or your hard disk drive. When you dismount, that means you want to take this hard disk, for example, to another system, all right? You need to decrypt the data, right? Because there will be an interconnection between your system to the hard disk drive with a password, all right, typically. So you, in the process, during decryption, you might corrupt the data, but it is necessary in some areas of work and things like that. You need to encrypt your data, especially your SD card on your phone, because it's very simple to store all your information on the SD card. But once someone pick up your phone, all right, for example, they just need to take your SD card out and they can just plug into an SD card reader and they can retrieve all your data, even the web page that you have served and things like that might be residing in the SD card. So do remember to encrypt that SD card, which is on the phone especially. Right. Okay, so another PC. Okay, question. Okay, the next is there a default antivirus software good enough to protect my laptop? Okay, there's two kinds of user, right? So if you come for the course, I will let you know how to segregate from these two kinds of users. There's two kinds of users for any computer user or laptop user or phone user. The first will be those who always get a virus. The second will be someone who never gets a virus. It's more about the habit, all right? The habit of doing downloading, for example, right? When you download a software, when you download a program or download a game, right? And how you use the internet, right? The way you use it will typically lead you to whether you are able to get a virus or not to get a virus, all right? So in terms of getting antivirus software, right? If you come for the course that I'm conducting, all right, I will share you further how to even do without an antivirus software to so-called catch the virus that is residing in your PC, all right, or how to eliminate. Okay, so typically there's no one antivirus to fit all right? So there's many out there, all right? So, and some of them are free, and after some time they ask you to pay. That's the thing, right? So what is the relationship between the smart TV and a PC? All right, a smart TV is also a mini PC, all right, but it is not able to do as much in terms of configuration, in terms of powerful software being run, right? The smart TV might not be able to do that. Although you can surf the internet, do YouTubing on a smart TV, or some of your smart TV is an Android smart TV, you can load in Word document, PowerPoint, and things like that. But the speed, the processor, right, is not as good compared to a typical laptop or a desktop. It's just a basic entertainment device, all right, for a smart TV. Okay, how do we dispose our old laptop? Okay, first thing, before you dispose your old laptop, first thing you tear out your license, which is normally mounted on the back plane. All right, if you have an old laptop, right, there's a window license that is being stick behind your laptop. So first thing, you tear that out because that belongs to you. That can be reused. Second, make sure your hard disk, right, is formatted. Right, format as many times as possible because your data will be residing it inside, and we can use recovery software to recover the data that you have inside your laptop. That's the most important. So first thing you dispose, first thing, right, tear away the Windows operating system license number, right? If you have it, stick onto the back plane of your laptop. Second is to format your hard disk drive, right? Actually, formatting is not the best way to, all right? You need to actually load it with another operating system, which I will share with you if you all come for the course, right? Okay, so next is that Lenovo Mix 510 Mix 510 laptop speaker very soft. Any way to increase volume on, or is it a Windows 10 issue? All right, so okay, so the thing is that you ought to check. Is it a driver issue, right? Or is it when you try to run a particular YouTube, for example, or you try to run a particular program, right? The sound coming out from your laptop is soft. If it's soft throughout, that means whatever program you are using, whatever software you are using, right? As long you need sound, the sound is soft, right? Probably is because of your driver. Right, you might want to update your driver for your Windows 10. Search for the driver for this Lenovo Mix 510 laptop series. All right, you ought to upgrade your driver. All right, there's a driver that you need to update. All right, so my notebook battery cannot be changed until it is fully battery cannot be charged. All right, until it's fully discharged. Is it repairable? Right. Okay, so probably your notebook battery have reached a certain lifespan, and the thing is that actually to be honest, for maintaining laptop battery, a lot of us do have this habit to actually connect the power supply to your laptop, even though you are not having it portable. All right, you're supposed to let the battery have a power down, drain off cycle. That means once you see that your laptop is 100% charged, do pull away the power supply. Do not always leave the power supply on, right? So that it's forever charging. That will actually reduce the lifespan of your laptop battery, especially. All right. So do let it drain off sometime and let it charge back again. Okay. Right. Then is it okay to use USB extender? Okay, good question. All right. Is it okay to use USB extender? It really depends. If you have many devices that is tapping on the power of your main USB. Using a USB device, you might not be able to recognize all the device that is being placed on the USB extender because the power is only consistent from the main. So once you parallel run it, all right, the rest of the device can be only power on, but they are non-readable, right? So you really need to see how many extending device you have. If you have more than 3, right, I suggest that you have a powered USB extender. It means a USB extender port with power incoming so that you can supply the enough power so that your system can read it. If not, the rest of the device that is being hooked onto your USB extender cannot be used. All right. Okay. Can we off the battery from the laptop? Right. You can't off the battery from the laptop. You can, if for current, most of the laptop are inbuilt. Right. if you have gotten a laptop 2 to 3 years ago, they are normally removable. But nowadays, the laptop most of the battery are already inbuilt in some ways. All right, so inbuilt in some ways, that means that you need to, like for example, peel open, right, remove the screws in order to take out the battery inside to actually replace it. Right, so that's the thing. You can't off. Right, so my notebook cannot run anymore after updating. Right. So, okay, good question. My notebook cannot run anymore after updating failed. So what do you do? Okay, so chances is that while you are updating, first thing, your internet that is being connected to this laptop got corrupted. That means got discontinued, all right, or your Wi-Fi signal is not strong. Second, it could be while you are trying to, especially while you are trying to burn a CD, all right, or trying to burn a CD, trying to update your software, things like that. That's the only time where you need to put on a power supply for continuity. So just in case while you are updating, what happens is that your computer suddenly shut down, right? So what will happen is that it get corrupted. So in this case, probably your notebook cannot run anymore during upgrading is because your software got corrupted. So you need to actually go into safe mode. So if you are running on Windows, you need to press the safe mode key. Go into safe mode, all right, to let it let the software comes back again, right? You need to reboot, right? That's the thing. All right, how to detect Wi-Fi not working in the laptop? All right, if you're gonna detect how to detect Wi-Fi not working in the laptop. Okay, so first thing, if you want to check whether your Wi-Fi is working or not, so you might want to actually use the SSID from that Wi-Fi on your phone, all right, to check whether you go to Google to do checks. If you can't, then that means your Wi-Fi is down. Then if your Wi-Fi is healthy to start off with, all right. So when your laptop is connected to the similar Wi-Fi, all right, if you are not able to connect, probably your firewall have been set too high, or you might not have entered the correct password, all right, the WEP and your settings, all right. So that could be leading to your Wi-Fi issue. Right, does the laptop need to use frequently? Okay, good question, all right. So if you are typically using a laptop with a flip cover, all right, a flip cover kind, right, do bear in mind, it's not that you're gonna cold storage it, that means it can last longer. Sometimes when you have a laptop which is flip cover, especially if you keep inside the storeroom for too long or keep inside the bag too long, there's a flex that is connecting your motherboard to the screen itself. Once you open, the flex break, right, because it had been sitting at that position for too long. So moral of the story is do not leave your laptop sitting there for too long. If you need to, just try to power it on and use it, serve it, then after that, just put it back again. So never leave even if you leave a hard disk too long sitting there doing nothing, it might get faulty also as time goes by. Right? Is it true that laptop becomes very slow after a few years? Oh, yes, okay. It definitely will go slower because what happens is that as time goes by, there's more cache that you have gotten cache. All right, history from your internet. You might have gotten a malware, which while you are surfing unintentionally, the malware come into your PC, right? At the same time, it just literally install software or programs which you do not want, right? Those are called malware, right? Malicious software, right? Is due to surfing of internet, right? So as time goes by, you need to do some maintenance to it, okay? To quicken it up, right? To quicken your laptop health. Okay, so therefore we have the maintenance part of the computer system. So is desktop cost still relevant today since more of okay, as what I have mentioned, right, the gist of desktop, the concept of using a desktop and the concept of using a laptop is the same, right? So if you have a laptop issue and if you have a desktop issue, in which most of the time is a software issue, right, between a desktop and a laptop, the problem solving method is the same. Right. Similarly, for a desktop itself, all right, for the computer system, right, the fundamental of understanding a desktop is the same as understanding a laptop, just that a laptop itself is capsule and configured to be universal by itself, right? For desktop itself, you need to upgrade in a way. So if talking about whether is it applicable, yes, because the concept is still applicable throughout, all right, even to handphone. Okay, all right. So when switch on, okay, let me see. relevant today. How to dispose laptop? Can anyone access the data? Okay, yes, as mentioned before, if you're gonna dispose the laptop, make sure you take out the hard disk, all right, and make sure you clear the data in the hard disk itself, all right, because the hard disk is the most stores the most valuable data, right? So you do not want people to take your data, all right. So make sure you format it, clean it up, all right, completely. Okay, when switch on computer, there is a visible timing sound. Is this something wrong? Okay, there could be, okay, probably there's a beeping sound, all right? So computer, so is that you have to look whether is it a desktop or a laptop. So if it's a desktop, right, if you hear a beeping sound, could be likely your RAM having issue, right? And if you're gonna search, all right, the timing sound, you have to see whether is it too long beep, one short, right? Too long beep, one short, or too short beep, one long. Right, there's a telltale sign. There's a Morse code table to diagnose that. Okay, right. Do we need to link or upgrade router so that to receive faster Wi-Fi? Oh, okay. All right. This is a very common problem. Right. So there's blind spot. Right, blind spot within your home. Right. So sometimes because of the wall, sometimes because of the blind spot where your room is, the last room where your router is, all right? So you probably would need some Wi-Fi booster or Wi-Fi extender, right? Or Wi-Fi extending plug, right? To actually route the signal back to the last room that you have, all right? Where the blind spot exists, okay? Right. Do we need to link upgrade router so that, okay, we answer that question. Is it better to have two pieces of 1 terabyte or one piece? Oh, okay, yeah, so as what I've mentioned, don't place all your eggs in one basket, right? So that will answer the question. So if you need 2 terabyte, so it will be better, that's for desktop. So to answer to that question, why we still have desktop being existing, right? So you probably would want to have 2 hard disk drive, 1 terabyte each, right, to make up the 2 terabyte. All right. So, but if you have no choice, just like a laptop wise, you can only have 1 hard disk, you probably need to do backup. All right. Laptop wise, you do not have a choice of 2 piece or 1 piece. Okay. Right. Can just use a hammer to destroy my old laptop. I do not know what to do with it. Okay, your laptop itself, all right. So if you do not know what to do with it, first thing you need to take out the hard disk drive. The hard disk is the most, because you have your data inside. So other than that, you can just dispose it, right? You can just dispose it. You can go to any recycle place and just dispose it to the recycle bin. All right. What is HDMI? Is high dense medium. All right. So HDMI is a kind of, it's just like your VGA cable, right, which you connect from your computer to visual. So HDMI is, you have high definition, all right? So most of the TV now are HDMI. It's a connector. It's a connector to connect, instead of coaxial cable, right, connecting from your TV box to your TV, right? The HDMI connects from your so-called your DVD player or your computer or even your media box to your TV, right? Those is a connecting cable, right? Can a corrupted SD card be repaired or recovered? Yes, you can, right? So with the appropriate software, right, you can recover the corrupted SD card, right? So okay, we're gonna have the last question, all right? Where is your course? Okay, how do we sign up? Okay, now I'm gonna show you the course. Okay, quick one. Let me show you the course. Right, so the course is at IT College Central, right? So the details, you can actually go to the NSA website and also go to the e-virtual booth. I do have an e-virtual booth now, right? So you can go to the e-virtual booth and sign up and also ask questions about this computer maintenance repair short course, right? So its duration is 30 hours. It's not one, it's a 5 session, 5 consecutive Saturday. So you will start from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. But of course, you do have breaks in between, right? So it's IT College Central is the only place that you can have this course, and the trainer is me, right? So I have taught many courses, many classes, all right, today. Okay, right? So that's the course title, okay? Or you can even go to IT website, all right, to check out the short course. Is actually computer maintenance and repair. All right, okay. So let's move on. Okay, here we go. Right. So to thank you so much for your time and time spent. All right. I hope that you have a good, enjoyable online session with me. All right, so thank you. If you find our talk useful, do like and share the video with your family and friends to help them pick up these useful tips. All right, at their own pace and convenience. All right, this will be recorded. So to learn more about the computer maintenance basic diagnostic and repair course that is conducted by me, right? You can actually go to NSA courses by or other IT NSA courses by IT. You can contact the following number, all right, as shown on the screen, or visit the URL that is being stated there. All right, so also please call the number 64785029 or visit www.nsa.org.sg to explore the many learning opportunities for seniors aged 50 and above. All right, like and follow the C3A Facebook page to be notified of new content in the future. I do remember, all right, learning, there's no limitation, there's no age, right? Lifelong learning take place anytime, anywhere. All right, thank you so much, everyone. All right, have a good day and hope to see you soon in the course. Thank you.